Welcome very, very much to Conversations, where we have on the program this evening a special program, an interview that was conducted with the leader of Libya, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. And the interview was conducted in June 12th of 1991. That's almost a year ago now from the time that we talked, Labor Day 1992. And we wanted to present this program to the viewing audience outside of New York and other parts of the country, and also to present the program in a way that's perhaps a little bit different than most programming about Libya that has perhaps come on the television screens in the United States. We'd say right at the very outset, we did not intend this program or this interview to be a news-oriented exercise. There was a great deal going on at that time, of course, but following the Gulf War and so forth. But it wasn't meant to be a news-oriented interview so much as an opportunity for Colonel Gaddafi to talk about his philosophy of government, his way of organizing that country, his view of the world, which is unique and an interesting ideological frame of reference that he has in terms of some of the problems confronting the human condition. And we thought it might be fair in a certain sense for us to have him afford him an opportunity to present his views without the filter of a great deal of what might be seen by some as disinformation or propagandistic attitudes toward him. The program, as I said, the interview, as I said, was conducted June 12, 1991, near the town of Sirte in Libya, very close to where Colonel Gaddafi himself was born. And we did want to set up the program. The interview itself was conducted during the meeting of what they call the People's Congresses. We'll talk a little about that later. And we were able to do about a 30-minute interview with Colonel Gaddafi in a Bedouin-like tent in the desert near Sirte. And he was able to summarize many of his views of, as we say, of government and some of his thoughts. We thought it might be worthwhile to just set up briefly here an introduction and to put a couple of words that do come up in the interview into some perspective. You'll hear Colonel Gaddafi talk about the Jamahiriya, pronounced Jamahiriya, which roughly translates, in an Arabic term, which roughly translates out the state of the masses. And he says, particularly in this first segment, he lays out his view that historically the governments and the peoples of the world have moved through from where there were at first monarchies, and then the French and American revolutions a couple hundred years ago, setting up republics or representative democracy, where we vote for people to send to a Congress or to the executive branch of our government and so forth, which is the pattern which most people have in mind when they think in terms of democracy. It was Winston Churchill said democracy is the worst form of government other than all the others, and democracy is a term that is used by a great number of people, and it describes a number of different systems that are done in that word. It's a big word and one that we should try and understand. In the case of Libya, this Jamahiriya, they feel that, and what they've been moving toward is beyond the republic or representative democracy toward what they call a participatory democracy, or again, as we say, Jamahiriya. It's his feeling that the power of the country, the political power and the economic power, social power that exists within a given country should be in the hands of the masses, or in the hands of the people themselves. And they've got to great lengths to institute a system which may seem to us perhaps a little unwieldy or something of that sort at the beginning, but it seems to work for them, and it seems incumbent upon us to try and understand things from their perspective. They have something like 4 million people. It's a relatively small country in terms of population. Of course, it's on the northern edge of Africa, bordering 2,000 kilometers on the Mediterranean Sea, 4 million people or so, and they've divided the country up into about 2,000 people's congresses. and they've actually built Congress halls, meeting halls, where people can come together at various times of the year. Virtually the entire country comes together and meets in these various meeting halls that they have, or people's congresses, and the issues of international, domestic, and local affairs are discussed in a free context. They establish committees to carry out the activities that are decided upon by the people themselves, and they've gone to great lengths in order to have what would be sovereignty or real power vested in the hands of the people themselves, rather than in the hands of elected representatives, such as we are so almost reflexively accustomed to here in the United States and much of the world. It's a unique system, and it's one that you'll be able to see from the program. Colonel Gaddafi feels is one that is destined, in a certain sense, to become the pattern by which the world itself will organize. Social, political, and economic power will ultimately come to be in the hands of the masses of the people, rather than in the hands of what we might, in the current dialogue of this political season, called vested interests. And so in that sense, it's interesting, and they've gone to great lengths to establish this sort of a system in Libya. What we've decided to do with this interview that we have is, in total, is about 30 minutes. And we thought what we would do is divide it into two segments. So we have a first segment wherein we introduce Colonel Gaddafi, and then also allow him to talk about this Jamahiriya and ask him to describe it. It's old ground for him. He's gone over it. They've been following this pattern since they first instituted their revolution of September 1, 1969, when he and the people that were around him, they assumed in a bloodless coup responsibility for the country and have been operating it ever since. Many people felt that they would just establish a ruling oligarchic group that would run the control the country themselves. But indeed, they have gone to great lengths to establish this state of the masses, or the dissemination of power out among the people of the country. It's a unique experience and a unique experiment in terms of a system of government, and one that we felt should be able to be given a hearing it should be given a hearing by the American people. So we divided the interview into two segments, and we're just ready to run this first segment now, which is the beginning of the interview where he describes this. It runs about 8 or 9 minutes or so. We'll then come back and we'll talk a little bit about what he was talking about in that segment and some of the possible implications of it, and then come back for the second segment a little bit down the line or so. So we have that program, we have that interview. It's the beginning of the interview, and I would remind you again with Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. It was conducted in June 12, 1991, near the town of Sirte in the revolutionary country of Libya. Hope you might enjoy that. That's upcoming now, and if we'd run that tape now, then please. Thank you. My deep personal honor to welcome to the program this evening the leader of the Libyan Jamahiriya, Muammar al-Gaddafi, and Colonel Gaddafi, it is a great honor to welcome you to the conversation. I wonder, there have been many programs played in the United States that talk about Libya, but I wonder if maybe you could, in your own terms, explain to myself and to the American audience the concept that is unique to Libya and your thinking. You mean by Jamahiriya and the state of the masses and the need for there to be, on a world scale, a large-scale rethinking of the social, political, and economic organization of the countries and the world, as it were.
نعم، أقول لك هناك العديد من البرامج في الولايات المتحدة التي تتحدث عن ليبيا وعن القائد شخصيا، فهل يمكن للأخ القائد أن يشرح لي وللمستمعين الشباب في الولايات المتحدة عن عن معنى الجماهيرية وما هو المقصود بدولة الجماهير، والحاجة إلى إعادة النظر أو إعادة تشكيل النظام السياسي والاقتصادي والاجتماعي في العالم على أسس جديدة ومختلفة. Thank you.
يعني هي الجماهيرية هي نتيجة
الجماهيرية
التطور السياسي والتاريخي
is the inevitable outcome of human development in history and of political and historical development.
يعني المرحلة الأولى كانت الملكية.
In the first stages there were the monarchies.
الملك يملك الأرض ومن عليها.
Where the monarch owned the land and whatever was on that land.
والشعب ما له دخل في الملك، الملك يأتي من السماء.
And the people had nothing to do but to think he was God's gift to earth.
هذا انتهى بالتطور انتهى.
This is over.
بدأت المرحلة الثانية هي الجمهورية.
Then there was a second stage, the republics.
اللي أصبح الشعب يختار الملك.
Where people were allowed to choose the monarch.
يعني اختيار رئيس الجمهورية معناه اختيار من يحكم، اختيار الملك.
That is, choose who should rule over them. Like a president, which is more or less a king.
المرحلة الثالثة الجماهيرية.
The third stage is the Jamahiriya.
اللي الشعب يحكم فيها نفسه بنفسه.
Where people rule themselves by themselves.
يستغنى عن انتخاب من يحكمهم.
And they can do away with an election system in order to elect someone who could rule over them.
وهي معناها دولة الجماهير.
This means the state of the masses.
يعني والسؤال كان هاي كانت أمنية منذ قديم الزمان.
This was a wish, a hope, since unknown times.
لكن ما كانش فيه الطريقة اللي الناس تحكم فيها نفسها.
There's no practical way by which the people could rule themselves by themselves.
استغنوا عنه بالنواب.
So they had to substitute something for that, and that was by electing representatives or members to a parliament.
الآن جاء الجواب كيف الناس تحكم نفسها بنفسها.
Now we have the answer.
جاء الجواب.
Now we have the answer to how people could rule themselves by themselves.
وهو المؤتمرات الشعبية واللجان الشعبية.
And that is through people's conferences and through people's committees.
مثل ما نعمل قاعة للبرلمان.
Just as we build a parliament hall.
النظام الجمهوري مثلا.
The public system.
نعمل قاعات للجماهير الشعبية.
We build so many local halls for the masses.
ما ضروري تكون مبنية زي البرلمان.
Not necessarily built upon the same lines as the parliament.
ساحات مفتوحة.
It could be even an open space.
حتى في الشارع.
Even in the street if you like.
في المساجد، في الكنائس، في المدارس.
In a mosque, a church, anywhere.
هاي الناس تقرر ما تريد.
And these people decide whatever they wish.
في هذه المؤتمرات.
Within these conferences.
وشكل لجان لتنفيذها.
Then they choose people's committees to implement their decisions.
وأمناها المؤتمرات وأمناها اللجان.
And the secretaries of these people's conferences and these people's committees
يجتمعوا
meet annually
لصياغة ما قالته الجماهير في المؤتمر.
to synthesize the decisions of the people's conferences and the basic people's conferences.
كل مجموعة تقدر تشكل نقابة حرة.
Each group can form a union or start a union.
لكن أعضاء النقابات هم في ذات الوقت أعضاء في المؤتمر.
But the members of the unions are at the same time members of the people's conferences.
السلطة عند المؤتمرات الشعبية.
So power or authority is in the hands of the people's conferences.
واللي تنفذ اللجان الشعبية.
But the people's committees carry out the decisions of the people's conferences.
الشعبية.
And are answerable to the people's conferences.
المؤتمرات الشعبية كل الشعب في عضويتها.
And all the people are present in the people's conferences.
It is a participatory democracy.
هي ديمقراطية مشاركة، يعني كل الناس تشارك.
Rather than a representative.
وليست تمثيلية، وليست ديمقراطية.
لا ما فيش تمثيل إطلاقا.
There is no representation whatsoever.
Yeah, it's the people. That's what's hard for the world to understand.
قال هذا صعب جدا على العالم أن يفهمه.
كل من بلغ سن الرشد ذكر وأنثى هو عضو في المؤتمر الشعبي.
All grown-ups are members of people's conferences.
الناس تقرر ما تريد.
People decide whatever they want.
ويشكلوا لجان لتنفيذ ما قرروا.
And they choose people's committees to implement their decisions.
هاي النظام الجماهيري.
That is the Jamahiriya system.
وأنا يعني متأكد أن كل العالم مصيره للجماهيرية.
And I'm quite sure the whole world is moving toward the Jamahiriya system.
You believe the world will move in this direction.
العالم يتحرك بهذا الاتجاه.
نعم يعني في النهاية سنصل إلى مرحلة حتمية.
وهذا حتمي وهذا حتمي.
هذه مرحلة حتمية.
It's inevitable.
مثل ما قلنا يعني ملكية جمهورية جماهيرية.
Monarchies, republics, and then the Jamahiriya.
يعني النظام النهائي هو وصول كل الناس.
This is the inevitable system where all people will get power.
أنت شايف الناس الآن تتقاتل على السلطة في كل مكان.
Consider that people are killing themselves over power these days all over the world.
اللي ينهي الصراع على السلطة هو وصول كل الناس السلطة.
And the only way to get rid of this struggle for power is to get it to all the people.
لما كل الناس تشترك في السلطة ما عادش في صراع على
When
السلطة.
all the people participate in the power or share it, then there'll be no struggle for power anymore.
ما في كيفية يصلوا فيها كلهم الحكم إلا المطورات الشعبية.
And the only way of getting power to all the people is through people's conferences.
It's very interesting and unique. Do you find that there are many people in the West who have a hard time understanding what you mean when you say Jamahiriya? Because they're so accustomed to thinking of Parliament and Congress and the traditional representation of government.
هاي يعني من الناحية السياسية.
This is the political aspect of the theme.
وهي مكتوبة في الفصل الأول من الكتاب الأخضر.
And this has been explained in the first part of the Green Book.
الفصل الثاني من الكتاب الأخضر يتكلم عن محتوى الإطار السياسي.
The second part of the Green Book explains the economic content of the first part.
وهو النظام الاقتصادي.
And that is the economic system.
العلاقات الاجتماعية بين الناس.
Social ties and relations between the people.
حتى يكون الناس متساويين في المطورات الشعبية يجب التساوي في الملكية.
In order to make people equal in the people's conferences, they must be equal in ownership as well.
وبالتالي تلغى الأجرة.
And therefore the wage system must be done away with.
يعني ما عاد في إنسان يأجر إنسان.
Nobody is allowed to hire anybody else.
وهذه هي حقوق الإنسان المقدسة.
These are the sacred human rights.
أن الإنسان لا يؤجر.
That man shouldn't be a slave wage.
A wage slave. Right.
جهدك لازم يعود لك.
If your own effort is yours, your own property.
وإذا اشتغلت مع واحد آخر تشتغل أنت وياه كشركاء.
And if you have to work with someone else, then you should work as partners.
سواء كنتوا 2 أو 10 أو 100.
Whether it's 2 or 3 or 100 or 1,000 or even 1,000,000 people working together.
شركاء.
You must be partners.
هاي يعني البيت يكون اللي ساكنه.
The house should belong to the people that live in it.
الأرض ملك للجميع وكل واحد.
And the land should be the property of everybody. They should make use of it as much of it as they need to satisfy their own needs.
ما عاد إنسان يكون أجير لإنسان.
And nobody should be allowed to work under somebody else.
هاي المحتوى الاقتصادي.
This is the economic content.
There is a term, in need, freedom is latent. If people are in need, they are then beholden to those who have what they need. And this is an idea that is seemingly very simple and appropriate, but so much of the world has a hard time understanding.
تبدو بسيطة في للغاهب ولكنها هي بسيطة ولكن العالم يجد صعوبة في فهمها.
But there is an historical inevitability that the world must move in the direction of the masses of the people of the world having true economic, political, and social power, which historically they have not had.
التي يجب وأن العالم كله يجب أن يتجه نحو هذا الحل وهي فرصة لم تتحقق تاريخيا فيما سبق.
Of course, this is true.
إيه طبعا لأن هي لم تتحقق في الماضي لأن بطبيعة التطور.
It was not so before because of the nature of historical development.
هذه المرحلة النهائية.
Because this is the final, not the final, the ultimate stage.
This is the ultimate stage of social organization for the peoples of the world.
وهذا هو الترتيب الحتمي لكل الناس في العالم.
interesting that he does say there that he thinks that the Jamahariya is a pattern that the whole world will come to emulate. It's an interesting perspective that he does have there. We thought that maybe it would be worthwhile to reflect a little bit upon that and to go back again to this and to reiterate again. This is primer stuff as far as the country of Libya is concerned, but it well ought to be primer stuff because we here in the United States and in the West and in the world in general have not really, it seems to me again, have not been able to give this, perhaps serious consideration or consideration of this alternative system in this unusual political world and situation and era that we live in. Alternative systems might well be given, should be given a hearing. I might say at the outset, I was in Libya at the invitation of the Nord-Sud Institute of Geneva, Switzerland, which had been sponsoring, which sponsors an annual award ceremony. They award the Gaddafi Prize in Human Rights to an individual or to a group that has either advanced human rights or suffered because their human rights have been violated. And they have a symposium that goes along with that. And I had been invited there to Libya to participate in that symposium, which had given me the opportunity to be in contact with Colonel Gaddafi. It's interesting to speculate that they do have, again, back to these people's congresses, the idea of participation on the part of the people themselves. It's interesting to me in that we look at this election year, 1992, which has been a very here in the United States, where we come up to another presidential election, and we've had an incredible array of things that have taken place. We had the phenomena of a Ross Perot, who came along and on a television station one day on CNN, after having made some comments about the operation of our system here, our representative democracy here in the United States, said that he thought if he could get on the 50 states, on the ballots on the 50 states, that he might consider running for president out of the blue, completely unrelated to either of the political party's candidate. And there was this tremendous popular reaction to that on the part of so many people within our country who felt a sense of disconnectedness from the system, as it were. Richard Wortham ran a poll and found that it was up in the high 80s. We can find polls of people in our country now, and it's been reflected in other Western countries too, who feel a sense of disconnectedness to the political process. They feel left out by that. And it was largely because of that that they sense there was such a reaction of support for Mr. Perot. It was an interesting phenomenon that shocked and surprised the world, that there would be this element or this degree of discontent manifest. I said on some occasions that the volunteers or the calls for town meetings, Mr. Perot called for town meetings. The other major candidates now have moved and said they're willing to move toward town meetings, electronic town meetings, to get back to the ideas of the town meeting was one of the basic organizing political systems of our republic back in the early days, dealt with local affairs by and large. But the idea of town meetings is something that appeals to a great number of people within the American political spectrum. And it's interesting that here in Libya, they've systematically, since 1969, set up and had part of their governing organization what amounts to town meetings, where the whole nation meets and they try to keep sovereignty at the level of the people themselves. Interesting. It's just an interesting concept that a great number of people might be wanting to be familiar with here in terms of the situation in the United States. We also want to talk a little bit about the economics. He hinted at the economics or spoke of the economics. In Libya, they have been a bit isolated geopolitically in the world, in that they're There's been some critique of the traditional capitalist imperialist model that many people of the world have done. But he also has almost consistently critiqued, or had critiqued, the Politburo dictated, apparatchik-run state capitalism, as he would have called it, or the communist model in the Soviet Union, where all power and economic and political power was in the hands of the government in the name of socialism, or in the name of a communist system. Now, in Libya, while they call themselves it's a socialist country, and they certainly have vouchsafed the social services, as it were, everybody in Libya, by virtue of the government, and one should understand again that they were a very, very poor country until oil was discovered in the late 1950s, and then this revolution was made. But they've set up a system where all the citizens in the country own by right their own home. He has a dictum, they have a dictum in the country: in need, freedom is latent. If you are in need, then you cannot be considered truly a free person. It's an interesting concept in itself. So socially, they have established that every person owns their own home. Every person owns their own automobile or means of transportation. That's part of a context of freedom. All citizens, men and women, have access to education free, socially run, through the university, men and women. He's a women's liberationist in many ways. The university looks very much like a university in Southern California, the progress they've made in terms of education, and everyone has access to elemental health care. They've also socially built their infrastructure. They've put roads and electricity into every little village, and they've done a great deal socially to guarantee equity and the distribution of the wealth that came from the very rich oil deposits that Libya possesses. But interestingly, and from an ideological perspective, they've also maintained the principle or the institution of private property, in terms of the way they're going to organize the society. This is an interesting thing that ideologically the world has been fighting over: socialism, capitalism, and the institution of private property. But they have, for instance, a man or a person can farm. There's some little differences to it and so forth, but a man can farm as much land as he can farm himself is his, as long as he can do it himself. Or they have a private sector business community which can have private property ownership of a business and operate a business, but they have a rule. They have a dictum. They've suffered under inequality that was their historical lot. And they have the rule is that you can have a business, but the rule they have is to Libyans, to the people that make up the Jamahiriya, that you can't pay wages. So you can work as much land as you can, but you can't hire people to do your work for you, and so forth. In the line of business, you can have a business, but what you can't do is you can't hire people. It's an interesting way to avoid what might be called in radical dialectic wage slavery, but to do away with wages. But you can't hire people to do the work for you, and anyone who's involved in that business has to be a partner. They use the term partner. You'll see you'll see signs in Libya that says partners. Very often they misspell it, P-A-R-D-N-E-R, partner, which is rather nice, interesting, innocent English in a sense, but it's partners, not wage earners, and they're avoiding wage slavery and assuring that everyone be a partner in terms of the operation of a private sector. Private property business is an interesting concept. I myself have been long interested in the employee stock ownership plans that have been established in the United States. The work of Louis Kelso and Russell Long was involved in, and a great number of other people here in the United States who have been very involved in the idea of Avis Rent-A-Car Company, Weirton Steel, other companies. Maybe 10 million Americans now are parts of companies which are owned by the employees rather than having the ownership of the production held by one group and the other group be only workers or wage earners in terms of the system. So they've critiqued that and built an alternate system in Libya, and to a very large degree it works. You run into some difficulty with some clever people or entrepreneurs who would like to be able to hire people in the traditional entrepreneurial pattern, and if they've erred, it's probably on the side of maintaining the question of equity for the masses of the people as far as Libya is concerned. But again, it's a very interesting example, and one that we stress didn't throw out this institution of private property. It's an interesting model that perhaps more people here in the United States could listen to sympathetically, and again, particularly within this rather unique political context that is this 1992 presidential election year. So we have, that's another point that is to be made. We have the rest of the interview now. It runs for about another 20 minutes that we want us to run. And here we ask him to reflect a little bit upon his general view of the human condition. We talk a little bit about Libya and the relationship between the United States and Libya and other countries of the world. And again, keep in mind that Colonel Gaddafi does see his country as a model, and perhaps a vanguard model, of for the movement, and to answer some of the fundamental questions that confront us all. Interesting that we all are asking many of these kind of fundamental questions. It seems to me, again, judge for yourself, we're asking many of these fundamental questions that we here in the United States are coming to question ourselves, that we need some new social contract, some new system of organization to answer the sense of discontent that does exist. But let us set the rest of this interview up, and then we'll come back at the end. We want to talk a little bit about some of the more recent achievements that have been realized there in Libya, and then also to let you know how you can get in touch and obtain copies of what the Green Book, which is the book that Colonel Gaddafi wrote and forms the basis, the ideological basis for the way they organize that state. But we have the second piece of interview that we have, and again, this is June 12, 1991, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi from the city of Sirte, near the city of Sirte in Libya. So if we run that tape now, then please, and we'll come back to round this out. Run the tape now, then please. Thank you.
I wonder, are you optimistic concerning the human prospect? Or I sometimes, if I may, I sometimes worry about, particularly given my country, sad to say, and their mindset, I sometimes worry that there is such arrogance and such greed and such egoism that there is a threat to the continuation of the peace and to the continuation of the species. I wonder philosophically if you feel optimistic or perhaps sometimes pessimistic about the human prospect.
متفائل أو متشائم بالنسبة لمصير الجنس البشري.
والله حسب المعطيات الموجودة الآن هو في الإمكان يعني المعطيات الموجودة الآن قصدي.
According to Jesus and to what is happening, there is evil and there is good.
هي إمكانيات جبارة.
There are tremendous potentialities.
إذا استخدمت في الشر ستكون مدمرة.
If they're used for evil purposes, they will be destructive. If they're good used for good, for the good of humanity, it would be tremendous.
The
struggle on earth now all depends on whether or not the will to do good overpowers the will to do evil. And the first evil is capitalism. Capitalism must be destroyed. The rich class is very destructive and must be done away with. If socialism was to be realized all over the world, then good would prevail. Wars and the manufacture of weapons, destructive weapons, weapons of destruction, are all instigated and encouraged by the capitalists
يبحث عن الربح
out looking for profit,
حتى على حساب جثث البشر.
even at the expense of others, even at the expense of the dead bodies of millions.
إذا لابد من مقاومة الرأسمالية.
And therefore we must fight against capitalism.
والحل في الاشتراكية.
And the solution is socialism.
مش اشتراكية الاتحاد السوفيتي ولا اشتراكية.
Not the Russian, the Soviet Union type of socialism, or the socialism of China.
هي لم تطبق بعد.
This is a socialism which has not yet been applied yet.
اللي يتكلم عنها الكتاب الأخضر.
I mean the socialism advocated by the Green Book.
هي لم تطبق بعد.
This has not been applied yet.
عندئذ سنتوجه نحو الخير.
If it is, then we will be heading for good with whatever potentialities we have.
لازم الناس تقتنع بأن الرأسمالية هي نظام التضخم والحروب.
People must be convinced that capitalism means war. It means inflation,
الأزمات الاقتصادية.
economic crisis,
طالع.
unemployment,
استغلال.
exploitation.
يعني المفروض الناس تكون مقتنعة بأن هالشرور هذه.
People must be convinced that these evils
هي الرأسمالية.
are the outcome of capitalism.
يعني سواء كان رأسمالية الحكومة زي مثل الاتحاد السوفيتي أو رأسمالية الشركات
Be it capitalism of the state, as in the Soviet Union, or monopolistic companies.
Either one. Both.
رأسمالية.
It's the concentration of the ownership and the
هي
concentration of
تركيز
the power.
الملكية والسلطة في يد فئة.
هم هذول اللي يصنعوا الصواريخ يصنعوا القنابل.
It's these type of people who make the nuclear weapons, make the missiles.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
لكن يعني الإنسان العادي مش مهتم بصناعة الصواريخ العابرة للقارات.
The ordinary person is not interested in nuclear weapons or ballistics, intercontinental ballistic missiles or anything like that.
وطن أمريكي أو روسي أو.
Whether that ordinary person be American, Russian or anybody else, an Arab.
مهتم بمكافحة السرطان.
He is more concerned with the struggle against AIDS, to fight off AIDS or cancer,
ضد البطالة.
unemployment,
ضد البرد ضد الحر.
cold weather, hot weather, hunger.
يبغي مسكن يبغي مزرعة.
He is interested in a house or getting a small farm.
يبغي حليب.
He needs milk, eggs.
To live.
هذا المواطن العادي يعني.
ببساطة يعيش.
هذا المواطن العادي. كرش القنابل الذرية.
The ordinary person is not interested in weapons or nuclear weapons.
الولاة الرأسمالية هم اللي صنعوا هذا الشر.
The capitalists, they need these evils.
الدولة الرأسمالية والاتحاد السوفيتي.
A capitalist state
الشركات الرأسمالية في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية.
and the capitalist companies in America and other parts of the world.
If I may, in the United States now, capital assets, over 41% of all the capital, all the buildings and streets and all capital assets in the United States owned by the 1% of the population.
41% من كل الإمكانات.
Almost 41%.
يملكها 1% من الشعب، من عامة الشعب.
5% virtually own it all.
و5% لا يملكون شيئا على الإطلاق.
95% have no way to gain income but by wages.
95% لا يملكون أي وسيلة للدخل سوى الأجرة.
No ownership.
ما فيش ملكية.
You would advocate that they be, the people who make up a company would be partners rather than only wage earners. And I wonder if you might be able to talk of that.
Okay.
أولاً ثروة كل المجتمع يملك لكل أفراده.
First of all, the wealth or the resources of a certain community is the property of everybody.
يعني ثروة أمريكا لكل الأمريكيين.
The wealth of America belongs to all Americans.
بأي حق تستولي عليها 400 عائلة فقط؟
By what right should 400 families, for instance, divide it among themselves?
يعني هذه الثروة ليست ملك ل 400 عائلة، ملك لل 200 مليون.
This wealth belongs to 200 million Americans.
157.
ويجب توزع عليهم.
And it should be divided among them equally.
But it's hard because it is now already, they own it. They already own it.
صعب لأنها توزعت الآن.
لا يعني العمال يجب يستولوا على الشركات اللي.
No, it's not true. The workers could take over the companies which they run.
This book I give you is about how some companies begin to become owners of companies.
الكتاب يبين كيف أن بعض الشركات
try small.
ولكنها بسيطة.
But it's a small try.
لكن هذا حتمي يعني التحول إلى الاشتراكية اللي في الكتاب الأخضر.
But moving toward the Jamahiriya, moving toward the socialism advocated by the Green Book is inevitable.
Working towards
هذا مستقبل العالم.
This is the future of the world.
يجب ما نضيعش الوقت.
We shouldn't waste much time.
We haven't much time.
معاش وقت.
I get very worried because there seems to be such madness.
وأنا قلق جدا لأنه أعتقد أنه في جنون.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, and I worry about my country.
وأنا قلق جدا بشأن بلادي.
That I think they need, I suggest, a vision of how
أعتقد أنهم بحاجة إلى رؤية.
they can, the United States, the leadership or the country can relate to the needs of the less advantaged people.
يمكن بها للولايات المتحدة والمسؤولية المتحدة أن يروا أو يعوا حاجات الناس العادية.
Of our country and the world.
وحاجات المجتمع الأمريكي وحاجات العالم أيضا.
And they do not have it.
ولكن لا يملكون هذه الرؤية.
And for lack of vision,
وبسبب فقدان هذه الرؤية,
they are very dangerous.
They have over 1,100,000 people locked up in their prisons.
في الولايات المتحدة هناك لا نحو مليون شخص. أكثر من مليون
The
شخص.
highest rate of any country in the world.
وهي أعلى نسبة في أي بلد من العالم.
شفت في التقارير جمعية العفو الدولية.
I have looked at the reports of Amnesty International.
Yes, yeah. And
There are strong protests against America, especially against the penalties and sentences.
الناس محتاجة تكلفة مال.
People who are in need and have committed certain crimes
الناس مش مجرمين.
are given life sentences. They are not criminals. They are hungry.
الرأسمالية دفعتهم إلى هذا العمل.
Capitalism pushed them to commit such acts.
العنصرية.
And sometimes they have been pushed by racism.
terrible.
يعني في شركات بتصنع المخدرات.
Some make or manufacture drugs
العقل الأعصاب والوعي.
which attack the mind, the nerves,
مش تكسب نجم الكسب.
in order to make a profit.
Yeah.
ما يهمش الناس اللي يذهبوا ضحية.
And they don't care about their victims.
That's what I said. They don't care. They don't care. They seem not to care. And it's very, very dangerous that they don't have a sense of empathetic appreciation of the world, other people, including even ecology and a feel for the world other than the egoistic self of the ruling class. And for this reason that is very, very dangerous. It would be that there could be some way that they could be brought to understand how they could participate because they are so powerful.
لعله يجب أن تكون طريقة لإفهامهم قضية المشاركة لأنهم قوية جدا.
ما فيها يعني هذا بيد العمال مش.
I think this is in the hands of the workers.
يجب يعيوا هذا.
They should be fully aware of this.
هم اللي يجب أن يحطموا الرأس.
And it is the workers who should destroy capitalism or break up capitalism.
أما يكونوا شركاء أو يبطل العمل.
They should insist upon being partners or give up their jobs.
من بينتج لصالح الرأسمالية.
If they give up their jobs, who's going to make the production for capitalists?
الخطأ هو أن العمال الآن يطالبوا بزيادة الأجرة.
The mistake is that they are asking for pay raises.
Asking for pay raises, right? They should be asking for ownership.
يجب أن يطلب.
Exactly.
Yeah.
يجب أن يكون المطلب العمال من أنفس هو المشاركة.
The demands of the workers from now on should be participants.
Yes. Partners.
Yes, partners. And this should be the aim or the motive of the strikes.
I agree with you, but they're not.
مش واعيين.
They don't know. They must read the Green Book.
Yeah. I think I agree. Yeah. It is only the Green Book that says this.
والكتاب الأخضر الوحيد الذي يتحدث عن هذه المسألة.
طبعا لأن
I mean, Keynes.
العالم راس مالي ما يجيش يتكلم عنها.
The capitalists will not talk about such things anyway. About partnership and...
They might. They might. They might.
قد يتحدثون عنها.
If it were possible to find some way that they could see to change, that would be preferable. If they could change, it would be preferable than having there be a violence directed against them. If they could be convinced by consciousness, by Green Book or by something, to make meaningful change, because they are.
سيستوعبون ذلك.
The changes advocated by the Green Book are peaceful.
يعني التحول من الجمهورية للجماهيرية.
The change from the republic system to the Jamahiriya,
ومن الرأسمالية للاشتراك.
from capitalism to socialism, should be done peacefully.
ما ينادي ماركس أو
It does not advocate the same theory as Karl Marx.
No, I know. No. No, it's unique. It's unique, and for this reason,
ولهذا السبب فهو فريد من نوعه.
at this time, existential, right? Existential, this time.
هذا العصر عصر وجودي.
Unique thinking and unique new ideas are very important and should be precious and not ignored.
الأفكار الفريدة أشياء ثمينة جدا ويجب أن لا يتم تجاهلها.
Which is what they are. But I think that there would be great difficulty in the United States having it go so easily to Jamahiriya.
ولكن أعتقد سيكون من الصعب على
الجيل الجديد يثقف بثقافة جماهيرية.
If the new generation is given a Jamahiriya culture,
ثقافية عالمية.
what we need is an international cultural revolution.
Yeah.
This is the first step.
ومن بعدها يتغير هذا العالم الرأسمالي.
And then the whole capitalist world will be changed.
لا.
This world of exploitation and repression
ونخلق العالم الجماهيرية.
will change to a world of Jamahiriya and a world of socialism.
You think you have particular faith in the young people.
لديكم إيمان خاص بالشباب.
نعم يعني بشرط أن نحدث فيه ثورة ثقافية.
Of course, as long as we ensure an international cultural revolution among the young people.
Yeah, it could. I think, it's also important. Do you think that there be communication of these ideas? If I may, I live in New York and in the United States. There's very little showing of anything positive in the media in the United States.
إلا القليل مما هو إيجابي عن الجماهيرية في الولايات المتحدة.
It's important to be able to communicate to the people so that they, rather, because if they don't hear the idea, they can't think.
Yes, we should think about something about this. We must make a joint effort
نتغلب على الصعاب هذا اللي ما تخليش فيه اتصال.
to overcome these problems of communication.
هاي الأفكار لازم توصل للناس.
These ideas must get to the people.
العمال لازم يوصل لهم الفصل الثاني من كتاب الأحوال.
The people, and particularly the workers, they must get the Green Book, the second part of the Green Book.
The economic. That's the economic.
في أمريكا في أي مكان.
Yes, in America and everywhere else in the world.
هاي اللي يجب نفكر فيها أولا.
This is what we must think of first of all.
وممكن أنت وتريكي والدكتور يعني ممكن تعملوا حاجات.
And the three of us, you and Dr. Trakey, and I could do something about this.
آخرين.
Together with others, of course.
Yeah.
في كثيرين.
Many others.
I think the young people in America, I feel for them. I think they look for something.
أعتقد أن الشباب
They look for
يبحثون عن شيء.
something.
أنا بيجيني رسائل كثيرة.
I get a lot of correspondence from the States.
From young, good. That's good. That is good, because the people in responsible they tend to dismiss anything different, right?
الناس اللي في مواقع مسؤولية مسكرين البيبان.
But the young people don't,
ولكن الشباب مسؤولين.
I think we have had enough time for now.
Okay, is that enough then? Okay.
جي في أي وقت يعني إحنا.
But you are most welcome to come back some other time if you wish.
All right, fine. Well,
Anytime you like.
thank you very much.
Yes.
I was saying to him that when I was a young man, I hitchhiked through here. As a very young man, I went to Europe and I said, I'm going to go on and travel further with very little. And I said I would not write home to my family for money. And I hitchhiked through with almost no money because I would not write home. I was 19, and I came through Libya in 1957. And people were very, very good to me. I had a warm spot with my heart for Libya at that time. And I do now.
People like each other.
Well, I worried about my country. I apologize for the arrogance of the people who have the power, and I'm terribly sorry for what they did in 1986.
Yes.
We try. We put 8 hours of programming by satellite, independent of the networks, to reach the people in North America with Ali Traki and Ramsey Clark.
Okay.
Yeah, independent from
Yes,
the establishment. Okay. Shukran.
There it is, the interview we had with him. I hope you may have enjoyed that. I certainly did enjoy meeting him. He was a very gracious man. I was pleased that he said we might be able to come again. I would like to do that, and I think other journalists should be giving that country and his view a legitimate hearing rather than out of hand, rejecting it, as seems to have been the policy here as far as media and our country is concerned. It seems that way to me as an independent producer. Happy to have been able to share those perceptions with you. Country is moving along. One of the major things that they have achieved, and it all went through the People's Congresses and they worked it out, was the establishment of this very gigantic project called the Man River Project, which is one where Libya is a arid country, but they have rich semi-arid conditions on the north coast where most of the population is, and they have under the Sahara, there are tremendous deposits of fossil water that go back to the Pleistocene when conditions were very different than currently, and they've tapped this amount of water and they're bringing massive amounts of water to the north coast. And it's one of the largest civil engineering projects in the history of the world, perhaps, where they've got 4-meter in diameter pipeline that's laid under the all steel reinforced, laid under the desert, and they're bringing the water to the north where they could make that land bloom like the Imperial Valley and also serve industrial and other needs. Water is increasingly going to be an important component of the situation so far as much of the world and certainly the Middle East is concerned, and they have brought this off, and the water now is coming. It's now in the reservoirs near Benghazi and other parts of the city, other parts of the country. They have capillary systems of distributing the water for irrigation purposes to be done. But it's a major achievement that's been achieved and has now reached the end of its first phase, the major phase, and it should be given recognition and the importance there. They're going to be moving 4 million cubic meters of water a day up to that northern coastline. In an era where water is going to be of very great importance, it's no mean event, event that they've managed to pull off, and they've invested very wisely, it would seem, in terms of the future of building a future infrastructure. The ability for an alternate infrastructure. Water can last 50 to 70 years as far as they can see, and it's been carefully worked out with feasibility studies, and one is recommended to pay attention to that. Also to pay attention to the general thoughts and of that country and the way they've organized, the unique way that they've organized their country. And I am happy to have been able to have met with him and to have brought perhaps a less prejudiced view of that country. There's a great deal of positive things to be said about what they've accomplished, and it could well be that we here in the United States and other parts of the world could learn, could perhaps adapt a bit, we could learn something from them, and certainly it would seem to me, I would suggest, as a person who's met with a number of people in this society and understand this society very well, might rethink our attitude toward that country in this new era that's emerging on the world scale, and to be more forthcoming with perhaps even recognition and other attitudes toward that country. That at an official governmental level would be suggested, or even at a corporate level, and certainly on the part of the people themselves of the United States, it seems to me, would do well to give this country a consideration other than the propagandistic, and we haven't had any time to go into any of the charges that are normally leveled against them, most of which have proven to be false in a historical pattern. Virtually all of them have proven to be false in a historical pattern, and we should get out of our reflective view of thinking of them in some terrorist terms or something of that sort, because it does not do us well to not have ourselves informed about what the realities are of that country. They speak to the concerns of a great number of people, and in a time when the world is looking for alternative thought, alternative thinking, and how we are going to cope with this new world that is emerging out of the historical context. His is one example. There may be others, but his is one example, it seems to us, that is well worth understanding, in that he does touch upon some of these fundamental questions of social, political, and economic organization, and in a way that is a model that many people might very well repair to. So we are very happy to here on Conversations to have had the opportunity to meet with Colonel Gaddafi and to share his views and to present some of the views of the Libyan People's Jamahiriya. And we here on Conversations, of course, would invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again here in New York next week at the same time. But we're happy to have been able to bring this presentation to you here and to those around the country that we've had an outreach to, and would encourage you to understand the country more. Their relations were cut off in 1981, and they do not have an embassy, but it is possible to obtain complimentary copies of the Green Book through their offices at the UN, which they have been able to maintain a presence here in New York. And you can obtain copies of the Green Book complimentary by writing to the mission. We'll put the address and the phone number up so that you can obtain that and judge for yourself. And hope that perhaps this interview with him may have helped you, give you incentive to think anew about this country. We should be thinking anew about many systems in the world, and where there's a model that offers parts or glimmers or large segments of perhaps a pathway to some new way of thinking that could benefit us, it behooves us to try and pursue that. We're happy to be able to help perhaps in that venture this evening. So again, thank you very much for viewing. Happy to have been able to share these perceptions with you. For those of you in New York, we invite you to tune in again next week. And for those of you that we may be able to have a follow-up program with through satellite communication around the country, we would look forward to sharing more with you in the future. But that's it for this particular evening. Thank you very much for viewing. We invite you to again call to send for the Green Book and judge for yourself. That's what we're trying to do here on Conversations as well. So we'll see you next week here in New York, and once again, thank you for viewing. But for now, good night.